is going on with the weather, and as 2021 became 2022, we had absolutely outstanding island weather. So who better to talk about what was, what is, and what will be than not one but two of the Aydlett twins. That is Brandon foreground and Brandon. Good morning. Is that twin brother Landon in the back there? I can't tell because his mask.
That looks like a cross between my twin brother and a bump on my shoulder. Let me see if I can deal with that.
Realize you are within striking range, but it's totally cool. Hey, happy New Year to you guys and everything. How was your New Year's Eve?
Happy New Year's. It's been busy. Had a lot of night shifts, but weather never sleeps, so never do we. But had a great time with family and seeing some friends and just catching up on just seeing a lot of people. We had some friends that had come visited the island, so it's been great catching up with them, doing a little bit of hiking, and I've got a couple of pictures just to show you at the end of the slide deck, and just kind of show you what we did for our break. But I just want to give a shout out to my sister-in-law. She gave me this really nice shirt for Christmas. It's truly all about the weather, and so you can see that we are serious about our weather out here. So, but with that said, let me just go ahead and show you some of the satellite imagery. We do have a couple of things going on across the Marianas, and as I'm updating the slide deck from a couple weeks ago, we're kind of in the same boat with the weather. We've got another shear line that is coming right across the Marianas. You can see that right across the stretch from the southwest to the northeast.
Oh boy! And
of course, with these shear lines, that's where we see the increasing winds, seas, and surf. And so we've seen that across Saipan and Tinian, where they were gusting up into the mid-20s, upper 20, 30 mile per hour wind gusts. But they had almost an inch of rain yesterday. So we have been drying out on Guam, but Saipan having received nearly an inch of rain just yesterday. And so even as we proceed into the dry season, it is these shear line features that are really our wet weather makers for the dry season, and these help to keep our fire danger at bay. But we're going to continue to dry when this shear line has moved out. But like I said, the thing to be concerned about will be the winds, seas, and surf. As we look across Micronesia, it's very quiet across the whole region. And let me just show you, I'll pan over to my other computer screen, and we'll take a look at the water vapor imagery. And so where you see, actually, I just inadvertently moved that around. But where you see this yellow, that indicates very dry air and the high levels of the atmosphere. And where that dry air is, it is sinking air. So it is warming and drying. The blue and the white indicates moisture. And so the Marianas right here, we've got a large high pressure right over the Marianas, and it's pushing all that drier air across all of Micronesia. And we've seen this be the case for much of the past several weeks. And it's one of the reasons we've seen our rainfall really shut down across Guam since the first or second week of December. And one more graphic I want to show you is this is a satellite-based atmospheric moisture. So if you were to take all the moisture in the atmosphere over one single area, a column, and condense it into actual water, liquid water, this is how much you would see. So over Guam, we're looking at about 1.5 inches of moisture. And so all that is in the clouds of the shear line, which is fairly dry. In the wet season, we could see the precipitable water, this atmospheric moisture, ranging up to about 2 to 2.25 inches, 2.5 inches for a really wet period. But where you see the blue, that is indicating very dry air that is sinking down across Micronesia. We're seeing values around 1 inch or just below an inch, which is impressively dry. And so that's going to be much of the story for the next couple of days. And with that, Jason, let's go ahead and switch over to the slide deck.
You got it.
And we'll go through some of the headlines.
Yeah, so and Brandon, as your charts kind of indicate there, like they say, perspective is everything. You switch from a particular view, like a satellite view, to like the thermographic view, or like something like that more accentuates what the dryness is going to be like, or the precipitation. I mean, it really makes a difference on what the situation could be.
That's right. The satellites are just really incredible instruments. They allow us to see so many different things in the atmosphere. We've got other satellites that allow us to see what the moisture content is at different depths of the atmosphere. It gives us more insights into how patterns are changing. And there is actually so much satellite data that's available that researchers are still going through it to see how we can make use of it in an operational sense. So we are very fortunate to have the satellites in the sky constantly in orbit and providing us so much information from just a routine weather monitoring as we have today to when we have tropical cyclones developing across the area. The satellite imagery helps us see through the clouds. We can assess where the centers of these storms are and really get a better feel for the intensities of these storms that may be not quite readily apparent just looking at the cloud features. So satellites really help us big time in the world of meteorology.
Absolutely.
But anyways, let's go through and look at some headlines. So like I said, sea, surf, and winds are up across the Marianas. We have small craft advisories and high surf advisories in effect through the small craft advisory in effect through tonight. And then the high surf and the high rip current risk is through Tuesday afternoon. The shear line is reaching Guam today. So right now I'm looking out the window. We've got quite a bit of sun shining in, but we're going to see those clouds filling in later morning with the winds gradually increasing. And we're going to see a kind of a temporary respite in those winds tomorrow, but we're going to see another surge in winds Wednesday night into Thursday. And like I said earlier, for Micronesia, fair weather spans the region, but we could be seeing some minor inundation around times of high tides. So you remember back in early December, we had those king tides, the lunar phase. We had a massive Central Pacific wind system that kicked up a lot of large ocean swell that affected all of Micronesia and the Marianas. We don't have that in place right now. So this new moon phase will probably just be kind of limited into the type of inundation we see around high tide. A little bit of splash up above normally dry ground, more than usual, but not nearly the significance of what we saw last month. So next slide, we'll go to kind of a big picture satellite view, kind of what I showed you on our weather computers. The shear line is right over the Marianas. We're watching this thing.
So it has moved down.
Southward. That's right.
Yeah.
So last week we had a shear line that stalled right north of Saipan near Anatahan, and then it dissipated. This one is going to march all the way through to the south of Guam, and it should stall out to our south tomorrow morning or so. So until then, we're going to see the gusty conditions, some showers just kind of periodically passing through the islands. Those will eventually pass to the south and then stall out south of us by Tuesday. And we'll go to the next slide.
Well, Brandon, I got a question real quick, if you don't mind, right? Let's back up to that one if we can, because I got
Absolutely.
it up on. Is there any signs or anything to indicate that if we have this like shear line, which is kind of like moving slowly to the south down on top of us, would that prevent storms or weather systems coming up from Typhoon Alley? Because does one counteract the other one, or can both coexist?
Yes and yes and yes.
Okay.
So
works for me.
When we see, so it's a loaded question. Now, when we have these really strong trade winds in place, it is very difficult to get tropical cyclones to develop. You need a nice disturbance that will fester for several days. So a disturbance consisting of heavy showers, thunderstorms that just kind of lingers in the same area for several days. That will start to get a little bit of rotation. And then it starts to take on its own form, modifying the surrounding environment. In the case that we're seeing right now, the water vapor imagery, that big area of yellow that you saw, right now the atmosphere is quite hostile to tropical cyclone development. It is too dry in the mid and upper level of the atmosphere. So pretty much above 6,000 feet, you're going to be dealing with very dry air. And for tropical cyclones to develop, we want to see deep layers of moisture. We want to see a lot of convection, showers, and thunderstorms persisting. And then we start seeing some bends in the wind field. Now, you see down here in the lower left corner in the southwest, south of Palau and Yap, there is this trough indicated. That means there's some type of counterclockwise curvature in the wind field. This is typical for December into January and for the next couple of months of the dry season, where the winds go from the northeast to the southwest and then kind of curve down into the southern hemisphere. And so we're heading into the more active tropical cyclone period for the southern hemisphere. And we've been watching a couple of storm systems develop well south of the equator. So this is quite typical. But like a couple weeks ago, we did see a tropical cyclone try to kick off near Palau and Yap. And so that actually did develop and moved off into the Philippines. It was quite a notable system, but it developed out of a similar situation like this. But right now, we're going to be trade wind dominant, and so that does not bode well for any tropical cyclone development.
Gotcha.
And for that reason, we are all happy across the region.
Okay. Yeah. The other thing was, we've been talking about this like shear line, and as it's, like moves slowly southward and everything for going on like 3 weeks now. So as opposed to traditional storms, which, we'll see maybe like 2 or 3 days out, and we experience for like maybe a day, and then it, heads away from us and everything like that. We've had, this shear line like in our presence for like almost a month now.
That's right. And so this is like the fourth or fifth occurrence of the shear line. And so what the shear line comes from, it actually originates from cold fronts that pass off of the Japanese coastline. And so as the cold fronts kind of pass off to the well north of the Marianas, we start seeing the winds kind of dip down from the northwest, and then they curve up to the start heading to the northeast. But for the tropics, the very southern extent of the winds, it starts curving more with the trade winds. And so that's why we see the northeasterly winds across the Marianas. And so right now we've been seeing a periodicity of shear lines maybe every 5 to 6 days. And so that's fairly standard. We've been quite busy with the shear lines. I know looking at some of the Facebook postings we've had in recent years around Christmas and New Year's, a lot of times we've got a shear line in play. And so that is no surprise for us right now. But it looks like we're going to have a little bit of a break starting this coming weekend into early next week. Maybe we'll have like a 8 to 9 day period before the next shear line affects us.
All right.
But this time of year, it is typical to see those frontal systems pass by to the north and these shear lines grazing us.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for that diversion. I was just curious about that and everything. So, boys and girls, I hope you're paying attention at home, because there will be a pop quiz on Shear Line 101 right after this.
Yeah, and so I invite anybody, if you have questions about some of the weather patterns, feel free to send us a message on our Facebook page. We're always happy to give you some answers, and we're happy to educate people, tell people about weather. You'll be hard pressed to find a meteorologist that just will not keep talking about weather.
Absolutely.
But let's go to the next page. And so I'm going to show you the Ipan Buoy. This is just off of Jeff's Pirates Cove area. It's tucked away on the eastern side of Guam, just off of Ipan Telefofo. So this buoy is only exposed to the easterly swell. So where you see these kind of hot colors, the yellow, orange, red, that means there's a pretty good swell energy coming from that direction, and the southeast and the northeast. But we do have a significant northerly swell that right now the Ipan Buoy will never see based on its location. But the important thing I draw your attention to is right now the green indicates the current seas at the Ipan Buoy are right around 5 feet. The model data is suggesting a little bit smaller, lower seas, but there are a couple of known biases and weaknesses in the models, especially that close to Guam, that it kind of underdoes the sea conditions. But look at this upward trend from Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We're going to see that surf on the north and east sides of the Marianas start picking up as that next wind surge comes across the Marianas. And we'll go to the next page. And so, like I said, we do have a high risk of rip currents. Rip currents are always found across Guam's reefs and all the reefs of all the tropical islands, actually. And basically, as the large waves crash on the reefs, that water piles up on the reef and it has to eventually drain back out to the ocean. Where does that water drain? It drains through the deeper cuts in the reef. And so Tuman Bay, for example, there is a big cut behind the Dusatani Hyatt area. So the currents always go out into the ocean back there. And if you're swimming in the water anywhere from between Ipao Beach, Matapang Beach, you're going to note a pretty strong current blowing toward that end of Tuman. And so that flows out of the water. A rip current is very easy to get out of. You can escape it, but you have to keep your wits about you. The first thing, when you start panicking due to some type of water-related incident, you've pretty much guaranteed you're going to lose the battle when you're panicking.
It's like what they say about being in quicksand, right? The smartest thing you can do is just to stay calm.
That's right. So we like to remind everybody, if you get caught in a rip current, try to get out of it. And the best way to get out is to swim either side. Do not swim against the current. You will lose that battle. The currents can be very strong, very fast, but they are very narrow. So once you have swum to the side, you will get out of that current pretty quickly. At that point, you better hope you have the buddy system in the water, because there's going to be some choppy seas out there. And I've seen people get cut up very bad trying to ride the surf to get back out of the waves. So always swim with a buddy, have people on shore, have their eyes on you all the time. Even if you're swimming on a beach with lifeguards, if there's a lot of people on that beach and in the water swimming, you can't always guarantee the lifeguard's eyes are going to be right on you every moment. So always be smart when you're on the water. Right now, we are hearing that Retidian Beach is also closed to the wildlife refuge up there. They're noting the very strong currents, so they have closed the beach for a little while. So if you have any plans to go to Retidian, definitely call ahead, check in and see if the beach is open. But when they have strong currents, they have strong currents. But we'll go ahead and move forward. How's the week look for the next several days? We're going to see those showers picking up across Guam. We've seen those showers across the CNMI. They're going to drop southward today. We're going to see drier weather returning by Tuesday and Tuesday night, but the winds are going to pick up Wednesday and Wednesday night, with showers kind of lifting back over Guam and Rota. So the shear line for Tuesday stalls just to our south, and then the models are showing some kind of a bend in that shear line lifting back up northward. Could be grazing us Wednesday and Thursday, giving us those extra showers. Combined seas, they are going to be choppy. We're looking at 8 to 10 foot seas through tonight. They subside about a foot tomorrow, so we could be dropping that small craft advisory, but that is just a very minimal drop in sea conditions. But they're going to come back up for Wednesday and the rest of the week. We're looking at a northeast and a north swell. Definitely nothing trivial. You'll note those winds, 20 to 25 knots on the open waters. That's going to lead to some very choppy sea conditions. So they're not going to be the most pleasant to be out on a boat unless you've got a very large boat. But expect those conditions to rapidly change as you head from the lee side of the islands into the more windward sides. If you're heading north or south from Guam, once you get to the Rota Channel or south of the lagoon near Coco's area, is going to be some rapidly changing conditions. And
I'm just glad somebody ever said, like, the leeward side of Guam. I've only ever heard that used about Oahu, but yeah, Guam does have its own kind of more or less, right? Like a windward side and leeward side, right, Brandon?
That's right. So windward being on the east side, whichever side is directly getting hit by the winds, and then the other side is the leeward side.
There you go.
I want to do a quick brush up on the conditions across all of the Western Pacific. Kind of what the difference between now and back in early December was with the king tide cycle. So looking at the satellite-based sea height anomalies, we're still looking at about a 6 to 12 inch higher than normal seas across the far western Micronesia. This is largely attributable to the La Nina conditions we've seen for the past couple of years. So all the strong trade winds blowing from the eastern Pacific to the western Pacific, it tends to build up the water a little bit across the western Pacific. And so we've seen that upward bulge in sea heights. So that's one of the factors leading to higher sea conditions. But one thing to note is the conditions have subsided a little bit. So this is a Kapinga Marangi tide gauge. They are about 1 degree north latitude, south of Pohnpei. And so what I draw your attention to is this green line. Back in the early December, we are seeing the observed water levels exceeding the forecast tides by about 20 inches, almost 2 feet. So there was a couple of things at play. One was that bulge in the sea surface heights due to La Nina, but more significantly was a massive swell event that was across all of the Central Pacific that brought large northeast long period swell that really built that water up on the reefs and in the lagoons of the atolls. And so that's what led to the substantial inundation. However, this new moon cycle, early January, we're seeing that difference between the tide forecast and the actual measured water levels is much smaller. So we're only seeing a difference of about 6 inches. So we could still see some inundation, but certainly not to the extent of a month back. How about the Opera Harbor tide gauge? We're also seeing about a 2-inch differential where water levels are about 2 inches higher than the predicted tides. So that's a lot better than what we saw early December, where we're looking at 8 to 12 inches, I believe. And then just to close out, I want to show you, this was, my wife likes to go see the sunrise on the 1st of January every year. So this year we pulled ourselves out of our house very early, and we hiked up to the top of the crosses, Mount Lam Lam, Jumalong Manglo. I know there are several pronunciations, so please forgive me, but it's up at the crosses. There was quite a good crowd that morning. It was quite cool and very foggy up there. We had some light showers early in the morning, and so we're up there in the kind of blustery 20-mile-per-hour winds. It was a little bit cold for Guam, but the sun finally broke through the fog. The clouds lifted, and so that's my son Liam and my wife Shirley. So we had a good hike that morning, and
very cool. And the fact that there is fog under certain conditions on certain places on Guam is kind of itself like a pretty cool thing to do with weather. Like if you drive through Mighty and you look up towards like Agana Heights up in the mountains and everything like that, certain times in the day you'll see there's a little bit of fog, a little bit of the clouds will be like a little bit low, but it's really cool to see because you just don't see it that often.
Yeah, that's right. It's sometimes I'll be driving around after some heavy showers and you see it over Nimitz Hill, but definitely across the southern mountains, it is so beautiful early in the morning when it's cooler. And so with that, I just want to kind of encourage everybody that's listening to get 2022 off to the right foot. We know COVID is still at large all across the world. And one of the best things we can be doing for ourselves is getting fresh air, outside time, sunlight, get some exercise. And whether COVID's in the picture or not, get exercise. It's good for you. And it's a great stress reliever to be outside in nature and enjoying nature. And so when you're inside, check our forecast at weather.gov/Guam or /GUM, or find us on Facebook at NWS Guam. And again, I invite anybody, send us messages on Facebook if you have any questions about the weather. We're always glad to entertain your questions and glad to teach and explain tropical weather to you.
All right, nothing wrong about being a geek. I mean, I of all people am proud to be all about the things that I'm into. But when it comes to weather, you guys are the experts. So we appreciate the knowledge, appreciate the Happy New Year wishes, and appreciate the segment, man. You guys always swing for the fences on the show.
Oh, definitely glad to be here, and look forward to seeing you every week.
Okay, hey, who is NC State? Did NC State go to a bowl game this year?
They did go to a bowl game, but it was canceled against UCLA.
Oh,
in
no.
San Diego. It was canceled the morning or the night before, last minute. So.
Oh well. Hey, you guys didn't lose, so go Pack.
That's right. Absolutely.
All right, man. Have a fantastic day. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Take care.
Okay. So speaking of the weather, the tides continue to roll here on this show, and we are rolling right into our next interview where. Gentleman, a esteemed member of our island community who has led many different agencies, of course, the Supreme Court of Guam as the Chief Justice. He's led the Guam legislature on more than one occasion, and now he leads the Office of Public Accountability. The Venerable Honorable B.J. Cruz joins us right now to see what is the latest with public audits. So, Mr. Public Auditor,